Hi, this is Rob Rains with Powerful Identity. I wanted to share a principle with you. It's really an answer to a question that I've been asked many times by clients and others that I've worked with that have they wanted to know, how do you teach someone a principle, specifically when someone is not doing something the right way, or they're doing something that is working against them. They're trying to change and they're sabotaging their own efforts. How do you correct their behavior without causing offense, or without causing them to dig in their heels and actually make the behavior worse? And there are a few different methods to do that, but there's a pattern that I want to share with you. Regardless of the method that you choose to teach or to share, there's a pattern that I want to share that has helped me to do this successfully with a number of people. And regardless of what your belief system may be, I want to share a story from someone that I consider to be a master teacher, and that is Jesus Christ. And this story comes from the New Testament, from the book of John, chapter 8. And again, your belief system may be different than mine, and that's okay. Whether or not you believe in the Bible, this particular story will help teach the pattern, the principle that will, I believe, be very helpful to you in whatever coaching or teaching or correction that you want to do. And so this was a story about a woman that was taken by the Pharisees. This is a group of people that were trying to trap Jesus and trick him into going against the law, and therefore allowing them to condemn him or put him in jail. And this particular woman had disobeyed one of the commandments and was caught in the act of adultery. And the Pharisees brought her before Jesus and demanded that he make a decision as a rabbi. They wanted him to speak and decide on this case that they brought before him. And they knew that he taught mercy. They knew that he taught love and kindness. And they brought this woman before him and said, well, the law of Moses says that we should be able to stone her, to cast stones at her until she dies. But what say you? What's your opinion? And the obvious thing was that either that he would have to go against his own teachings and allow her to be stoned, or he would have to contradict the law of Moses, which was the Jewish law at that time, thus putting him out of favor with the Jewish people and exposing himself to be imprisoned. And his reaction, his response, contained 4 specific things that he did that were very, very powerful. The first thing that he did, it says that he stooped down and wrote on the ground as if he heard them not. And I found that fascinating. I always wondered, I wonder what he wrote on the ground. We aren't told what he wrote, but I always wondered what it was. But here's what I've learned in recent years, and that is that before I can teach someone else, before I can coach them, before I can help them, before I can really be my best in any situation, I have to center myself. I usually do that through meditation, through prayer, through a number of other things, some tools that I have at my disposal. But I need to calm any fears, any difficult feelings that I may have, and I need to center myself so that I'm able to access that higher wisdom that we each have inside of each of us, and not be driven by fear or lower frequency emotions like anger, jealousy, hatred, doubt, frustration, worry, and so forth. And I imagine that in this stooping and writing, that what Jesus was doing was centering himself, was taking a moment to perhaps write an affirmation or just think through a process, and the writing just helped to anchor that behavior. But what he did was center himself so that he could give the best answer, not just an answer, not just a good enough answer, but the best answer. The second thing, so the first thing he did was to center himself. The second thing he did, which I found fascinating, the answer he gave was, he stood up, and they continued to clamor for an answer. And he stood up and said, "He who is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." And the account says that beginning at the eldest and going all the way to the youngest, each of them dropped their rocks and walked away. They knew they'd been defeated. He had given the perfect answer. He allowed for stones to be cast, but only by those without sin, and they knew that none of them was without sin. And so he, again, had given the perfect answer, the answer that everyone needed, not just the woman, but everybody there. Now, the net result of that was that nobody was left to throw a rock at her. So the very second thing he did was to remove the threat to the woman's physical safety. This is key when you are teaching somebody, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or any of the lists of hierarchies of needs that people have. One of the highest needs they have is for their own physical safety and for their own physical needs to be met. And the most urgent need in that woman's life at that moment was the threat to her physical safety, or the most urgent need was physical safety. And he created that immediately for her. He removed all the threats to her physical safety and then called her attention to it. He didn't call it by saying, "Hey, look at me, I just got rid of your accusers." He asked gently, "Woman, where are thine accusers? Is no one left to condemn thee?" Causing her to look up and answer the question for herself, which she did. And she said, "No man, Lord. No one's here left to condemn me." So he removed the threat to her physical safety and made her aware of it. The third thing he did was to use words to create a place of emotional safety for her. He said, followed that up with, "Neither do I condemn thee." In other words, I'm not here to judge you either. I'm not here to criticize you. I'm not here to preach to you, to preach a big sermon about repentance. I'm not here to tell you how awful you are. I'm not here to condemn or blame or judge. The third thing he did was create an environment of emotional safety, use his words to build an emotionally safe space for her. And then the fourth thing he did, the very last thing he did, was to preach the doctrine in a sermon of 5 words. Go and sin no more. Now again, whatever you might be trying to teach to somebody, whatever principle or doctrine you might be trying to impart, our nature is to jump in and do that first, to say, "Look, you're making a mistake, you're doing it wrong," which he could have done, but that probably would not have been as effective. It would have roused a crowd against her that was already ready to be roused, and it would have made her defensive and put her in fear of danger. It would have driven her by fear, which made her not receptive to whatever he was teaching, or would have made her not receptive to whatever he was teaching. Instead, he first centered himself, second, removed all threats to her physical safety, created a physically safe place for her, then third, used words to create an emotionally safe space for her, sincere words. And then the very last thing he did was to teach the doctrine or the principle, and he did it succinctly. He did it with as few words as possible. Now, how do I use this in my coaching? I first need to center myself before I try and teach anyone else. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you do not have love for yourself, you cannot demonstrate love for somebody else. If you do not have peace within yourself, you cannot create a peaceful place for anybody else if you do not have emotional safety. So I create my own emotionally and physically safe place first. Then I make sure that the other person is in a physically safe environment. Then I create an emotionally safe place for them. And very finally, very lastly, in as few words as possible, teach the correct principle that needs to be taught. And I use it as much as possible using questions, or teach it using questions rather than just giving direct statements. So I share this with you in the hopes that this will help you in your coaching or in your teaching of other people. And I encourage you to follow this pattern in whatever it is that you're trying to teach. I have found examples of Jesus' teaching to be truly masterful. He was a master teacher. There are many, many master teachers on this earth, and I have seen them, again, follow a very similar pattern. One final word, because a physically safe space and then an emotionally safe space are in that hierarchy of needs before learning true doctrine or learning true principles. it's imperative that if someone that you're trying to teach or coach is in a situation where they are being abused, maybe an abusive marriage or an abusive partner relationship or an abusive home relationship of some kind or other, it's imperative that you help them realize it before you can coach them, before they can learn from you, before they can change in any way. They need to remove themselves from that difficult abusive situation, whether it be physically or sexually or emotionally or verbally, whatever kind of abuse it is. They need to remove themselves from that abusive situation before they can open themselves up to the kind of change that will improve their lives. That's it. I just wanted to share that principle with you and encourage you to try that pattern out and respond back. Let me know what your experiences have been with it. Mine have been fantastic. And just wanted to share that with love for you and wish you the very best in your coaching and teaching. Rob Rains with Powerful Identity. Have a fantastic day. Take care.